Have you ever had the feeling that someone who has passed on is still walking through your house? Perhaps an object that falls by itself, a clock that stops at a specific time, a scent that appears out of nowhere in the air, or even that soft voice, almost a whisper that you swear you heard when you were alone. For many, this is just a coincidence. But for widows and widowers who have experienced the pain of losing their life partner, these moments are felt as something much greater: messages, signs that love does not end with death. And here arises a question that both bothers and intrigues. Why do so many people, especially those over 60, continue to report these experiences? Is it just longing transforming memories into illusions? Or is there in fact a bridge between this world and the other, which only those who have loved deeply can perceive? It is at this point that Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, comes in. A simple man, but one who left behind such impressive revelations that even today scholars wonder, how could someone know so much without ever having studied the subjects he spoke about? Cayce believed that life after death was not a hypothesis, but a certainty. And he said that the spirit of those who passed never completely separates from those who still need to finish their journey on earth. But before we delve into Cayce's visions, I want to speak directly to you who might be hearing these words with a heavy heart. You who wake up and feel the empty space beside you in bed. You who, upon opening a drawer, find a shirt still folded, as if time had frozen. And amidst that heavy silence, signs emerge that seem to want to tell you, I am still here. It's not madness. It's not weakness. It's an experience that thousands of people share, and that is precisely why we need to understand it. What is striking is that these reports intensify in maturity after the age of 60. Why might that be? One possible explanation, according to Cayce, is that with advancing age, the barriers between the conscious and unconscious become more porous. The mind, less caught up in the rush of work and daily responsibilities, makes space to perceive what was previously ignored. In other words, you become more sensitive, not because you are becoming fragile, but because you are closer to a spiritual truth. Imagine this: if life were a big train station, each berth would be a boarding, and each death a disembarkation. But the tracks don't end at the journey's conclusion. They continue, invisible to those left on the platform, and those who depart keep sending signals, as if waving from the train car window. The problem is that not everyone can see that wave, but some can. And it is about these signs that Cayce left precious clues. He said that the bond of love is a real, palpable energy that cannot be destroyed. It's like gravity. You don't see it, but it keeps everything in place. When two people share decades of life together, the bond that forms goes beyond the body, so when death takes one of them, the connection continues to exist. And if it continues to exist, it's natural that it will somehow manifest. What we call messages are, according to Cayce, simply the ways this bond finds not to be lost in silence. Now notice something curious. Many widows and widowers report the same types of signs, even without ever having met each other. Objects that fall always at the same time. Clocks that stop at the exact time of their partner's death. Perfumes that appear in closed rooms. Subtle sounds, like footsteps in the hallway. These details repeat so often that they could hardly be just coincidence. What does this reveal to us? Perhaps you are thinking, but isn't it just my mind playing tricks? That's a fair question. Psychology explains that grief can generate intense sensations. The brain, trying to adapt to absence, can indeed create perceptions. But what about when two different people in different places report identical experiences? Is it really just collective imagination? Or does science simply not yet have the instruments to measure what is truly happening? Here's where Cayce's vision becomes so valuable. He said that death is merely a change of state. The spirit remains alive, but on a different frequency, like a radio station. You can't hear a station if you don't tune it correctly, but that doesn't mean it ceased to exist. What happens is that in moments of vulnerability or deep love, we change the tuning, and we pick it up. And if that is true, then every time you smell that perfume she used to wear, every time you hear that whistle he used to make, you are not imagining it. You are tuning in, you are receiving a reminder that the connection has not ended. But why, after all, do widows and widowers over 60 report more of these experiences? Cayce suggested something even more intriguing. It is at this stage of life that we approach, little by little, the very threshold of death. Not as a threat, but as a natural transition. And by being closer to this border, we begin to perceive more clearly those who have already crossed over. It's as if the eyes start to get used to the dim light, allowing us to see what was previously invisible. Think about it. Perhaps the loneliness you feel is not just absence, but also preparation. A way for the heart to get used to perceiving the invisible, so that the reunion, when it happens, is not a shock, but a continuation. And that thought changes everything. Because suddenly those small signs are no longer a weight that presses on your chest, but a gift. A reminder that the story you built together lives on, even if in a different way. Now, I know that up to this point, you must be asking yourself, but how can I be sure that I'm not just deceiving myself? How can I distinguish between longing and a real message? That's the big question. It's also the question many of Cayce's followers asked him during his lifetime, seeking to understand how to separate the mind from the soul. And that is precisely where the deepest part of this revelation begins. But before we move on to that, I want you to reflect on something simple. If you had passed on first, wouldn't you do everything in your power to leave signs for the person who remained? Wouldn't you try to show that you are still present? This is the logic that gives meaning to what we are exploring. Love is not just remembrance. Love acts. Love seeks. And sometimes, love finds unexpected ways to cross the silence. Have you ever noticed that doubt is what troubles us most? When a sign appears, an object that moves, a scent that suddenly emerges, a feeling of presence beside you, the heart wants to believe it's real, but the mind quickly intervenes. What if it's just imagination? This internal battle is common to almost all widows and widowers. And curiously, it was one of the questions most studied by Edgar Cayce. He said that the difference between imagination and a spiritual message lies in intensity and repetition. Imagination is fleeting, it dissolves like a dream. A true message, however, returns, insists, leaves marks that cannot be ignored. It is as if the Spirit were saying, I don't want you to doubt. I want you to know that I am still by your side. Consider a real example, recorded in reports from people who consulted Cayce. A 72-year-old woman, widowed for 3 years, recounted that whenever she felt lonely, her husband's favorite armchair would creak by itself, as if someone had sat in it. At first, she thought it was just the old furniture settling, but it always happened on the days she cried the most. Cayce explained that it wasn't a coincidence. It was her partner's energy trying to show that his support hadn't disappeared. Objects, he said, are conductors. The Spirit's energy finds a channel in matter to manifest. This type of revelation completely changes how one views loneliness, because suddenly the empty chair is no longer just a symbol of absence, but a sign of presence. Have you ever thought of it that way? That perhaps that sound, that detail that once seemed trivial, is an answer to your tears? Cayce also spoke of another form of communication, dreams. He said that the state of sleep is the most direct bridge between the two worlds, because the rational mind falls silent, and the spirit gains space to act. That is why so many widows and widowers report such vivid dreams, in which their partner appears smiling, talking, sometimes even hugging. These dreams are so intense that upon waking, it's hard to believe they weren't real, and perhaps it isn't a common dream at all. Cayce affirmed that in these moments it is not imagination, but genuine encounters on subtle planes. Now I want to ask you, how many times have you dreamed of someone who passed away? How many times have you woken up feeling that their hug was still on your skin? Well, perhaps it wasn't just longing, perhaps it was a visit. And isn't it curious that the older we get, the more frequent these dreams become? Cayce's explanation is that the spirit, already closer to the natural transition, becomes more receptive. It's like an antenna that, over time, starts to pick up increasingly clear signals. This is not weakness, it is not neediness, it is spiritual maturity. But perhaps the most impressive point is this. Cayce said that not only do the deceased send messages, but the living also, unconsciously, ask for them. When the pain is great, the heart opens like a call, and the one who has departed responds. Think about it. Perhaps every sign you receive is not just an initiative from the one who left, but also the result of your own silent plea. A kind of invisible dialogue. There are also reports of objects that disappear and reappear in improbable places. A ring that vanishes from a drawer and turns up days later on the living room table. A photo that falls out of a closed album. These occurrences, which to others might sound like simple distractions, take on a different weight for a widow or widower. And Cayce confirmed these are attempts at communication, because the spirit cannot write a letter, cannot call you, but it can move small things precisely to show that it still exists. And here arises a question that goes a little deeper. If they can send us signs, why don't they show themselves clearly? Why don't they appear before us with body and voice, eliminating any doubt? Cayce responded that this doesn't happen because the shock would be too great for most people. Life on Earth requires us to focus on the present, and seeing the dead as if they were alive could trap us in the past, hindering our own growth. Therefore, the signs are subtle. They come as soft touches, just enough to remind us that love hasn't died, but not so strong as to prevent us from moving forward. This balance is difficult to accept, I know. But think with me. Have you noticed that sometimes a sign appears precisely at the moment you are about to give up? At the instant when the pain seemed unbearable? It's as if there's an invisible hand holding you just so you don't fall. This is not coincidence. It is care. It is love in its most silent form. Cayce also added something curious. We shouldn't expect grand manifestations, because the true purpose of messages is not to prove anything. It is to comfort. The presence of those who have passed comes not to convince us, but to strengthen us. Doubt, according to him, is part of the process, because it is in doubt that faith is born. And here arises a delicate point. Some people, upon hearing stories like these, say, "This is dangerous, it's an illusion, it's clinging to the past." But perhaps these people have never felt the pain of losing someone with whom they shared their entire life. Those who know what it means to lie down and look at the empty side of the bed know that a small sign can be the difference between continuing to breathe or surrendering to despair. It is not weakness to believe, it is survival. Now, imagine something with me. If today you received a clear message, an absolute certainty that the one you love is well and still by your side, how would that change the way you live each day? Would you wake up lighter? Would you have more courage to face your routine? Or perhaps you would even find a new meaning for the years that remain. This is the proposition that Cayce leaves us. It's not just about comfort, but about liberation. But there's another fascinating detail. Cayce claimed that messages can also come through other people. A grandchild who, without understanding why, says a phrase the deceased used to say. A friend who appears at the right moment, bringing exactly the words you needed to hear. These coincidences for him were indirect forms of communication. The spirit manifests through those who are available, as if using someone's mouth or gesture to say, "I haven't left." And if that's true, how many times might you have received a message without realizing it? How many times has someone told you something simple, but that sounded exactly like your companion would have said it? Think carefully. It might be that you have been touched many times but didn't recognize it. This possibility opens up a new horizon, because it means that we are not just surrounded by absence, we are surrounded by signs. It's just that we don't always know how to interpret them. And that is precisely the point where we need to go deeper. Cayce said that recognizing a message requires three things: attention, openness, and gratitude. Attention to notice the small details. Openness to not dismiss everything as coincidence. And gratitude because the more we are grateful for the signs, the more frequent they become. It's like a conversation. If you ignore someone who talks to you, they stop trying. But if you respond with gratitude, the conversation continues. Now think with me. Have you been paying enough attention to the signs? Or have many of them gone unnoticed because you were too busy trying to convince yourself that they weren't real? Perhaps the difference between feeling the presence of your loved one or not feeling it lies only in the way you look. Have you ever noticed how life has a curious way of teaching us? When we are young, we chase after proof. We want certainties. We seek direct answers. But after 60, it seems life changes its tone. It begins to teach us through subtleties, through small, almost imperceptible details. It's as if it's saying, "You've learned to deal with the obvious. Now it's time to perceive the invisible." And perhaps that's why so many widows and widowers at this stage of life perceive messages at home. Edgar Cayce explained that these manifestations are not random. They have a purpose. For him, every sign is a reminder of two fundamental truths. First, that death is not the end. Second, that the life we still have needs to be lived with meaning. In other words, those who have passed are not just telling us, "I am still here." They are also asking us, "Don't give up on living." This completely changes the way we look at these signs. Because they are not just comfort, they are also invitations. Invitations to transform emptiness into movement, to transform pain into strength. Have you ever considered that every message you receive might also be a form of encouragement? As if your partner were saying, "I am well. Now it's your turn to carry on and enjoy every day you have left." Cayce used to say that the soul does not send messages to feed sadness, but to give hope. If a sign makes you feel stuck in the past, it's probably not an authentic message. A true message brings peace, courage, and clarity. Even if tears come, they are not of despair, but of relief. This is an important criterion, don't you think? After all, how many times have you asked yourself, "Am I just deluding myself?" Well, Cayce answered, "Illusion imprisons, a message liberates." But there is an even more intriguing question. He believed that by perceiving these signs, we are not just receiving something, we are training. Yes, training. Training the spirit to recognize the continuity of life. Because one day when it's our turn to cross over, it will be this same recognition that gives us serenity. It's as if each message is a silent preparation for the reunion. Have you ever thought about it this way? That perhaps the signs you receive today are not just memories, but also rehearsals for the future. This takes a huge weight off, because it means that the loneliness you feel is not in vain. It has a function. It is shaping in you a sensitivity that will accompany you when your time comes. And here enters a powerful reflection. Often, widows and widowers ask themselves, "Why am I still here? What is the point of living longer if the person with whom I shared everything is already gone?" Cayce had a direct answer. You are still here because there is something to be done. It could be something simple, like imparting a word of wisdom to a grandchild. It could be something bigger, like helping another person endure the same pain you have already faced. But there is always a reason. Life does not keep anyone on earth by chance. Now think with me. What if the messages you receive are reminders of this purpose, as if the spirit of the departed were saying, "I fulfilled my time. Now it's your turn to complete yours." This doesn't make the absence easier, but it gives it meaning. Another important point Cayce emphasized is the power of silence. According to him, messages do not manifest amidst the hustle and bustle or the noise of the mind. They emerge in moments of pause, reflection, and solitude. This explains why so many signs appear at night, when the house is quiet, or on tranquil mornings, when we haven't yet been swallowed by the day's tasks. It's as if silence is the door through which the invisible enters, and perhaps you've already noticed this. In the midst of confusion, nothing happens. But the moment you sit alone in silence, something happens. A memory invades, a sensation appears, an object seems to move. Coincidence? Or a response to the space you created? Cayce would say that it is precisely in that space that dialogue between worlds becomes possible. Now allow me to raise a delicate question. Many people are afraid of these signs. Some get scared when they perceive footsteps, voices, or objects moving. Others blame themselves for believing, as if they were betraying reason or the faith they learned in childhood. But Cayce taught something liberating. There is nothing to fear. The presence of those we love does not come to scare us, but to calm us. Fear only arises because we don't understand. When we understand, fear turns into gratitude, And this gratitude is essential because, according to Cayce, giving thanks strengthens the bond. It's as if each thank you were a response to the message received, and that response encouraged more signs. Have you ever thought about that? That perhaps instead of being scared or doubting, it would be enough to say softly, "Thank you, I know you are here." Another fascinating aspect is how these signs influence our view of time. Anyone who has lost someone knows that time seems to divide into two parts, before and after the departure, and often the after seems endless. But according to Cayce, when we understand that there is continuity, time changes its meaning. The after ceases to be empty and becomes merely an interval, and an interval always has an end. This gives hope. Now, imagine living your next years not as a drag of days, but as a conscious preparation for reunion. Imagine looking at each sign not as a reminder of loss, but as a rehearsal of reconnection. This changes everything, doesn't it? And here I want to open an even deeper reflection. Many widows and widowers feel guilt. Guilt for laughing, for feeling pleasure, for thinking about moving on with life, as if happiness were a betrayal of the one who departed. But Cayce said the opposite. The greatest message the Spirit sends is precisely this: live. There is no betrayal in continuing. There is faithfulness. Faithfulness to the love that desires your happiness, not your imprisonment. So when you receive a sign, think about this. It doesn't just come to console. It comes to liberate, to give you permission to move forward, to say that life continues in every sense. And this understanding is so powerful that it can transform not only your relationship with the past, but also with the present. Because suddenly, every daily gesture, making coffee, tending the garden, chatting with a neighbor, can be seen as part of a larger purpose. You are not just living, you are honoring the love you built. But there is still a question we need to address. If these messages truly exist, why do some people perceive them and others do not? Why do some widowers feel surrounded by signs, while others say they have never experienced anything similar? Cayce responded that this depends on the openness of the heart. Those who are willing to feel. Those who close themselves off due to fear or disbelief hardly perceive anything, not because the Spirit is not present, but because there is no tuning. It's like trying to listen to music with your ears plugged. And this leads us to an important conclusion. Perhaps it's not a matter of waiting for the sign, but of preparing to perceive it. And this preparation involves exactly what we've already said: silence, attention, openness, and gratitude. It's not magic, it's tuning. Now let me ask you, have you allowed yourself to feel? Or have pain and fear closed your ears to what is around you? If life still gives you messages, perhaps it's time to change the way you receive them. Perhaps by now you are wondering, after all, what is the greater message behind all these signs? Why do widows and widowers, especially after 60, continue to experience things that seem to defy reason? Is it just comfort to endure loneliness, or is there something much deeper at play? Edgar Cayce had a clear answer. He said that these manifestations are not just contacts between the living and the dead. They are reminders of a truth that has always been with us. Life is not limited to the body. The body is merely the instrument. The spirit is the melody. And the melody never fades. When someone we love departs, the music doesn't end. It just changes its tone. And it is through these signs, discreet, subtle, yet persistent, that we are reminded of this. For Cayce, these phenomena have three main purposes. The first is to heal, because grief wounds, and the wound needs to be treated with something greater than human words. The second is to prepare, because all of us, sooner or later, will make the same crossing. And the third is to inspire, because the life we still have needs to be lived with courage, not with fear. This vision changes everything. Imagine that every sign you perceive at home, the clock that stops, the music that plays by itself, the vivid dream that seems more real than life itself, is not just a memory. Imagine that it is medicine, a way for the love that does not die to heal the cracks in your soul. Isn't that comforting to think? But Cayce didn't stop there. He went further. He said that when we accept these signs, we are not just receiving a message, we are strengthening the bridge between worlds. In other words, communication becomes clearer, more present, not because the spirit is stronger, but because we become more sensitive. It's as if we are learning a new language. At first, we understand only a few words, but with time, we can comprehend entire sentences. And here enters something very special. Many widows and widowers report that after some time the intensity of the signs changes. Initially they are more frequent, almost urgent. Then they become softer, more discreet. Cayce explained that this happens because as the pain lessens and faith increases, the spirit no longer needs to exert as much effort to be noticed. Love finds other ways to make itself present, through peace, serenity, inner certainty. Now let me ask you a direct question. Are you perhaps already receiving these messages on another level? Maybe no longer as noises or moving objects, but in the calm that suddenly appears without explanation, in the smile that emerges amidst tears, in the simple act of waking up and realizing that despite the absence you are still standing. This is also a sign. This is also a message. It just changed its form. And this leads us to another crucial point, legacy. Cayce said that beyond any spiritual contact, the true bond between those who have passed and those who remain lies in the legacy that was built together. What is legacy? It's not just photos, inheritances, or objects. It's the way of speaking, the shared stories, the memories that shaped who you are. Every time you act in a way you learned from the one who departed, you are living that legacy. And in a way, you are continuing his or her life. This means you are never truly alone. Because the person who left lives through you, in the simplest gestures, in the food you prepare because that's how you learned, in the music you sing because they taught it to you, even in the silence you shared together. All of this is continuity. All of this is presence. And it is precisely here that spiritual signs find their deepest meaning. They don't just come to show that the other person is well somewhere distant. They come to remind you that you too still have something to accomplish here, that the story isn't over, that love is not past. It is present in motion. Now think with me. How would your life change if you started to look at each day as part of this legacy, as if each of your actions were another chapter in the story you began together? Wouldn't that give new flavor to your morning coffee, to simple conversations, to the small rituals of everyday life? Perhaps this is what the signs want to tell you, that you don't need to live only on memories, but also on continuity. Cayce believed that this is the true victory over death, to transform absence into presence, to transform pain into wisdom, to transform silence into legacy. And this is a choice that is in your hands now. You can look at each message as a burden or as a gift. And if you look at it as a gift, you will notice something extraordinary. Life did not take away your love. It just gave you the chance to live it in another way. Perhaps no longer hand in hand, but heart connected. Perhaps no longer in long conversations, but in silent signs. And one day, when your time comes, this invisible thread will be what makes the reunion inevitable. Until then, the invitation is simple. Live. Live each day as if it were a response to the love you received, not as someone who lost, but as someone who continues. This is Cayce's great revelation. Death does not separate us. It only changes the form of presence. And perhaps that's why so many widows and widowers, especially over 60, continue to find messages at home. Because they have learned that life is not just made of what is seen, but also of what is felt. And feeling is often the truest way of knowing. Now I ask you, what signs have you been receiving lately? Isn't it time to recognize them as gifts? Think about this with care. If this video touched something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. This helps this message reach other people who, like you, also need hope, comfort, and direction. And above all, remember, you are never truly alone. The love you built is greater than death and lives on within you. Always.